The Biscuit Tree. Once there was a brownie called Mickle, who was very poor. He lived in a tumble-down cottage and grew potatoes and cabbages in his garden, and nothing else, because it was so small. But though he was poor, he was as kind as could be. If anyone came knocking at his yellow front door begging for a penny, he would shake his head and say, "I haven't even a halfpenny, but you might have a slice of bread or 2 or 3 potatoes." If anyone wanted help, Mickle would always run to give it. When old Dame Frances broke her leg, he went in to sweep and dust her cottage every day, and he fed her hens so well that they laid even more eggs than usual. And when Mr. Winkle had his roof blown off in a storm, Mickle took a ladder and spent the whole day mending Winkle's roof most beautifully. Most people knew how to reward Mickle for his kindness. They would give him a few biscuits. Mickle was so poor that he never bought a biscuit for himself. His meals were mostly bread, potato and cabbage, sometimes with soup for a treat. And he did love biscuits so much. "I really don't know which biscuits I love most," he would say. "The ginger snaps are marvellous, such a lovely taste, and the chocolate biscuits that Dame Frances makes simply melt in my mouth. And as for those little biscuits with the jam in the middle, well, I could eat them almost all day long." Now one day, Mickle had a bit of bad luck. A goat got into his garden and ate all his winter cabbages, and when he went to his sack of potatoes to feed himself 1 or 2, he found that a rat must have told his family about them, for nearly all had disappeared through a hole in one end of the sack. Mickle could have cried. All of his winter greens were gone, and most of his potatoes. What was he to live on now? He went indoors. He had been to help Pixie Lightfoot to dig her garden that day, and she had given him 6 pat cake biscuits as a reward. It meant to keep them for Sundays and eat one each Sunday for 6 weeks at tea time, but today he was so hungry that he felt he could eat them all. Now just outside at that very moment was a little child. Her father was travelling through the village. She was tired and cold, and when she saw the smoke rising from Mickle's chimney, she thought it'd be very nice to peep inside the door and look at the fire. So, as Mickle was about to take a bite from the first biscuit, he saw the door slowly open and the untidy curly head of the little child come peeping round the corner. Mickle stared in surprise. The child smiled and came right in. "I'm cold," she said. "I saw the smoke coming from your chimney, and I wanted to look at a nice warm fire." "Come sit down by it," said Mickle at once. "It's only made of sticks from the woods, but it's cheerful and warm." So the little girl sat down and warmed her hands. She looked at the bag what Mickle was holding and asked him what was inside it. "Biscuits," said Mickle. "Ooh," said the child, but she didn't ask for one. Her eyes grew rounder and she looked small and hungry. Mickle felt that he simply must give her a biscuit, so he handed her one. "Oh, thank you," said the little girl, and crunched it up as quickly as a dog eats a bone. Then she looked hungry at the bag again. Mickle knew he shouldn't give her any more because he wouldn't have any left for the next 5 Sundays. But he found his hand going inside the bag, and there it was, holding out another biscuit. Well, the girl ate 5 of those 6 biscuits, and Mickle was just handing her the very last one when there came a shout from the gate. "Hey, Annie, where are you? Come along at once." The child jumped up. Her name was Annie, and it was her father who was calling her. She gave Mickle a quick hug and flew out into the garden. Her father was standing by the gate, waiting. "This brownie has been so kind to me, father," cried the little girl. "Give him a reward. Please do." She bit her last biscuit, and some crumbs fell to the ground beside the gate. Her father trod them into the earth with his foot and muttered a few strange words. He looked at Mickle out of bright green eyes. "Sometimes a bit of kindness grows and grows and brings us a reward we don't expect," he said, "and sometimes it doesn't. But today there is magic in the wind, so maybe you'll be lucky." He nodded to Mickle, and he and the child went dancing up the lane together, their claws blowing like dead leaves in the wind. Mickle shut the gate and went back to his warm kitchen. He was hungry and all his biscuits were gone. Life was very sad. He forgot all about the man and his daughter that spring. He never saw them again, and he worked so hard that he really hadn't time to think of anything except food and rest and work. But one day he noticed a strong little shoot growing by his gatepost. He bent down to look at it. It was not like any seedling he'd seen before. Perhaps it was a weed. Mickle thought he would pull it up, but then he thought he wouldn't, so he left it. And to his enormous surprise, it grew and grew very fast indeed, till in 3 weeks' time it was as high as the top of his gate. It sprouted into leaves, it grew higher still, it grew into a small tree, and Mickle had to walk under it when he went out of the gate. It was really most extraordinary. He talked to his friends about it. They were used to magic, of course, but no one had ever seen a tree grow quite so quickly. "It will flower soon and we'll know what it is," said his friends. And the next week, sure enough, it did flower. It had funny flowers, bright red with flat yellow middles. The blossoms didn't last long. The red petals fell off and the flat yellow middles grew larger. Everyone was most puzzled, till at last Dame Frances gave a shout and slapped Mickle suddenly on the shoulder. "It's a biscuit tree, that's what it is, a biscuit tree. Goodness me, I haven't seen one grown in the kingdom for about 500 years. A biscuit tree, a biscuit tree." Well, Dame Frances was right. It was a biscuit tree, and no mistake. The biscuits grew till they were ripe, and a sort of sugary powder came over them, and then they were ready for picking. And how Mickle enjoyed picking biscuits off his biscuit tree! You would have loved it too. He's got some big and little tins from his grocer, lined them with paper, and then picked the biscuits. He laid each one neatly in a tin, until the tin was full and he could put the lid on. And then he took up another tin and filled that. He really did enjoy himself. He gave a tin of biscuits to everyone in the village. This was just like kind old Mickle, of course. They were pat-a-cake biscuits, and for a long time nobody knew why the tree was a pat-a-cake biscuit tree, nor why it had grown at all. And then Pixie Lightfoot suddenly remembered that she'd given Mickle some pat-a-cake biscuits some months back. "What did you do with them?" she asked Mickle. "Did you eat them?" "No," said Mickle. "I gave them all to a child." "Did she drop any crumbs near your gate, where the biscuit tree is growing?" asked Lightfoot. "Yes, she did, and I remember now. Her father stamped them into the ground and said that sometimes kindness grew its own reward, and he said that there was magic in the wind that day," cried Mickle. "Ah, now we know everything," said Lightfoot. "It was your own bit of kindness that grew. From the biscuit crumbs came your wonderful tree, Mickle. Oh, how marvellous! I do hope it goes on flowering year after year." Well, it does, of course, so Mickle always has plenty of biscuits to eat, sell, or give away. Go by his gate in Misty Village during the summer and see his biscuits growing on the tree. He'll be sure to give you a pocketful if you wish him a good morning.